morning, everyone, and welcome to the teaching video for worship with us at City Collective this morning. We are so glad that y'all are tuning in, following along with us in our series on Rule of Life. And I wanted to begin our time together this morning by reading this psalm. So if you want, you can turn to Psalm 46. That is where we're going to be. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. Psalms is like right in the middle of your Bible. But this is Psalm 46. We're going to read the whole thing. And we're going to start in verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shield with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God." Listen to that again. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations," says God. "I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." Does that psalm seem more difficult to accept now than maybe it would have been 5 months ago? I don't know about you, but if I'm honest, I find it difficult to read these words and for them to resonate with the deep parts of my soul compared to how I would have read them maybe 5 or 6 months ago. To read and truly accept that God is my refuge and my strength. As I reflect on these past few months, the thought of God being my refuge and my strength seems comical because I've felt weak and I have felt feeble and I have felt like I was without a place of emotional or spiritual shelter. To read that God is an ever-present help and that I do not have to be afraid. How can I trust that when I've felt afraid and isolated? And I feel like I've been left to figure out a lot of really difficult things on my own. To read that the Lord is God over all the earth, that he is in control no matter what, and that anything that happens he is still Lord. How can I trust that with such large-scale disaster present in our lives, on our social timelines? It seems foolish if we're being cynical, and if we're being charitable, it seems naive to think that God could still be Lord over all of this. I have spent so much time praying recently, asking God, where are you? And why won't you just make all of this stop? And yet, the Christian claim is that despite my experience and my struggle and what I'm feeling, that these things in the Psalms are fundamentally true about God. That they are not just some external idea to grasp or to read about in a textbook or to read about in the Bible and say, yep, I got that, I can answer that on a test. But they are truth that was wrapped in flesh as a person, and it is waiting to be experienced. That person, Jesus, he is waiting for us to experience him in his fullness so that we do not just know that truth in our head, but we know that truth experientially, even in the deepest marrow of our bones. You see, I think that my experience has not lined up with the claims of the psalmist for a number of reasons. I'm not trying to be simplistic or reductionistic or anything like that. I'm not trying to claim that there aren't seasons where we will naturally question more than other seasons. I think this is definitely a season where there is some grace for that. What I am trying to claim, however, is that a lot of my confusion, a lot of my hurt, and a lot of my general disillusionments that I've experienced in this season, for me personally, is because I have failed to listen to the command of God in verse 10 of this psalm. I have failed to be still and know that He is God. That is a verse that almost anyone who has spent any amount of time in church or in Christianity knows. We put it on wall decorations in our house. We put it in our Instagram bios. And that's just a verse that people generally know. But despite that verse's wide popularity, a few years back, Dallas Willard, who was a theologian and a philosopher, who was an amazing follower of Jesus when he was alive, he said that hurry is the great enemy of spirituality. Think about that. Hurry, the very antithesis of being still before God. That is the great enemy of spirituality. Carl Jung, who was a psychologist who laid the framework for pretty much all of the Myers-Briggs personality type test, he pretty much was like the godfather of introvert-extrovert theory and stuff like that. He said that hurry is not of the devil. Hurry is the devil. And countless thinkers recently have taken up the mantle of teaching about the great dangers of hurry. The question I have to ask myself is, have I listened? Not just have I heard what they had to say, but have I listened in a way that instilled these values in my life? There's no doubt that a great number of things present a tremendous challenge to the Christian faith in our time. I don't need to read you the list about COVID and racial tension and the war on sexuality and all of these things that we are feeling deep in our souls. What's more jarring to me than maybe reading a list of all the things that seem to be threatening Christian faith and Christian relations between people and relations between non-believers and believers and all of these things, what's more jarring to me than reading a list of all of those things is the fact that so many respected thinkers who were so smart spent their precious time promoting the idea that we are spiritually unwell primarily because we are hurried. Let that thought sink in. That we are too busy to be still and know that God is there. To know that He will be exalted among the nations and that He will be exalted in the earth. And maybe most importantly, that He cares deeply for me and He cares deeply for you. See, that is what being still and knowing that He is God means. When God disclosed about Himself to Moses in Exodus, He said, I am the Lord your God. I am slow to anger. I am compassionate. I am gracious. I am abounding in steadfast love. That is fundamentally what it means to know that He is God. And we're too busy to remember that. I believe that if we lack the maturity and the discipline to simply sit in this truth, if we lack the maturity and the discipline to live out of a deep relational knowing of God's nature, then we will never possess the maturity and the discipline to exist as the church that we were intended to be. Theologian Karl Barth said that the church exists to set up in the world a new sign which is radically dissimilar to the world's own manner and which contradicts it in a way that is full of promise. I love that idea. How can we be a church who is so content with our being that we are healthy and helpful enough to engage in the meaningful work of the church for our day, but not just to engage in good work, but to do it in a way that is contradictory to our world because it is full of promise and the truth of the gospel? How can we be a people who are a royal priesthood, who are full of grace and hope and peace and all of the fruits of the Spirit as we accomplish the work of God, which is the flourishing of all people? I would argue that based on the teachings of Jesus, based on the lifestyle of Jesus, based on some of the most faithful followers of Jesus in the history of Christianity, that you can make a very strong case that the thing we need to do most is to embrace a rhythm of stillness and slowing before God. And that has to be a replacement for our addiction to hurry if we are ever going to be the people who are mature enough and who are disciplined enough to exist as a church which is setting up a sign to the world that is radically dissimilar to the way of it. That is contradictory to the way of the world in a beautiful and promising way. Spiritual director Ruth Haley Barton writes that many of us have no idea how addicted we are to human striving, to hard work, and to performance-oriented drivenness until we actually stop. She goes on to list 10 signs that we are too hurried in one of her books. She's also an author. Now I'm going to read this list of 10 things that reveal we're either too hurried or suffering from hurry sickness and kind of coming down off of hurry. When I read these to you, I want you to be honest and just go through and say, which of these are present in my life? Not in shame, not in condemnation. I can guarantee you my score on this is way higher than I wish it was. But just to have an honest assessment and acknowledgement of where we're at in our life and how our soul is when we hear the invitation of Jesus to come to him. I've been reading a book recently called What If Jesus Was Serious? And in it he talks about how the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' most famous teaching, that when he is describing people like blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are the hungry, blessed are those who thirst for righteousness also, like blessed are all of these people, that we often make the mistake of making this a prescriptive list, so something that we're supposed to do, when really it is a descriptive list, because these people, the poor in spirit, the meek, the hungry and thirsty for righteousness, the peacemakers, these people are the most inclined and have the most to gain if the gospel is true. It is descriptive of the type of person who is just on the cusp of the kingdom. And so if you answer these, if you have more of these 10 that you say yes to or that are present in your life than you would want, then it is a beautiful reality that maybe the kingdom is right at the cusp of your life right now. So, 10 things. Number 1, irritability. Do you find yourself overly irritable? Number 2, hypersensitivity. Do you find yourself feeling fragile or easily broken or offended by what happens in the world? Number 3, restlessness. Do you have trouble resting? Not just sleeping at the end of the day, but do you have trouble resting? Like this deep, abiding rest that is renewing and restoring you. Number 4, compulsive overworking. Do you find yourself unable to stop working? Like you have to work. You need it. Number 5, emotional numbness. And this is not that you don't feel anything. It's that your palate or your bandwidth for feeling emotions is extremely narrow. Because to be human means to feel the full breadth of human emotions, from happiness, sadness, anger, joy, comedy, all kinds of things. But emotional numbness usually just looks like feeling anger or just this baseline frustration with life that is discontent. And that's all you're really able to feel, if you can even feel that deeply at all. Number 6 is escapist behaviors. Do you notice a pattern of behaviors in your life that are escaping from the reality of the day? That to not sit and watch Netflix for hours or scroll through social media or whatever it may be, to not do those things would feel like you're suffocating under the weight of the world. That to not use those things feels like you're being held underwater, and those things feel like the only way for you to come up for air. Number 7, disconnection from identity and calling. Have you forgotten who you are and who God has called you to be in the world? Does that sound like too big of a cake to even take a bite out of? Number 8, hoarding energy. You're unable to engage in what is presented right in front of you because you're kind of weighing your scale and being like, I can't interact with this because I just have so much that is going to require so much of me that I can't give of myself to anything more. I do that all the time where I kind of save energy because I know that I have something really difficult. Confrontational conversations are really difficult for me. So if I have that coming up, I will hoard energy and just kind of turtle myself out until that conversation happens. Number 9, an inability to attend to basic human needs. Are you forgetting to take care of yourself, to eat well, to exercise, to read? Are you forgetting that you too are a human who needs to be taken care of and ultimately you are vulnerable? And then number 10, slippage in our spiritual practices. Do 2 weeks pass and you've forgotten that you didn't even pray for the past 2 weeks? Or you didn't read your Bible, or whatever your practice of choice is, do you just kind of wake up one day and be like, yeah, I didn't even realize that I didn't do that yesterday? Like I said earlier, that's one of the few tests that I wish I would score lower on. But the sad truth is that I am way more hurried than I would like to admit, and I do it to myself so often. Kind of like how I am at Thanksgiving or a holiday. I see everything out there and I don't want to miss anything. So I put everything on my plate and then it all starts to jumble together. And then the things that I was really excited about eating lose their unique and their individual taste because they are now overcrowded and they have no space to simply be the meal, the beautiful piece of food that they were. They are a victim of being cramped up too near and too close to other things because I did not make room on my plate for it. What's even scarier about these 10 things is that in Matthew 15, Jesus teaches that it is not what a person eats that defiles them, but rather it is what comes out of their heart that defiles them because, what comes out of their mouth defiles them because what comes out of their mouth is directly connected to their heart or to their soul or to their very being. And if any of these things are what are coming out of your mouth or what are coming out of your heart in this season, just know that you are not alone. But I believe that the things that are in our heart, so if it's irritability, if it's anger, if it's hatred, if it's resentment, if you see a post on social media and your first instinct is to be like, why the heck would that person say that? Like, don't they know how dumb they sound? I've had too many moments in this season where I have seen things and I have just had to repent and lament my response to seeing them initially because what came out of my heart, it was defiling. It was because I had become addicted to hurry, and when I am in a state of hurry, I am not being formed in the way of Jesus. And so what comes out of my heart is not of the essence of the gospel. C.S. Lewis said that who we are when we are interrupted is who we truly are. Or how we act when we're interrupted is who we really are, and that is a terrifying reality to me. Because you take that idea and you sandwich it with Jesus' teaching in Matthew 15 that what comes out of our heart is what defiles us, and I realize that I have fostered and created and nurtured a heart that does not have time to be interrupted by people or even by what God would be doing in my day. If you look through the Gospels, just read through them sometime, and you will quickly see that most of the Jesus stories are interruptions. The Good Samaritan begins with a teacher of the law stood up to ask Jesus a question. I don't think Jesus was looking for that. Or Jesus is on the way to go and heal someone or to go and do something, and someone touches his garment, and he is so unhurried that in the moment he says, "What was that? Who touched me?" He has time to be interrupted. And when he is interrupted, what comes out of his heart is grace and mercy and compassion and the kingdom of God. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that so? What comes out of our hearts when we're interrupted? Are we too hurried or too busy to create an environment and a rule of life and a habit where those things are what comes out. As I said earlier, I've had far too many instances during this season where what came out was not the result of the sanctification of the work from the Holy Spirit, but it was a depiction of a heart that was too distracted for empathy, of a heart that was too hurried for kindness, and a heart that was too busy to actually be love in action. Does anyone else feel this deep level of guilt and conviction about how many of these are not just things they can slip into from time to time, but they're starting to feel like aspects of who we are? Does anyone else feel like that? This is where it's hard to teach on camera. I wish I could see y'all, someone raising their hand or at least nodding or something. I would feel a lot better about myself. I'm going to imagine that people, if you're in your living room, you're raising your hand right now. Preaching to a camera. What's even crazier about all of this is that for the majority of us, we're in the midst of a time where it seems like Mother Nature, if you will, obviously not Mother Nature really, but where it seems like because of natural circumstances, we have to slow down our tempo and pace of life. We don't have 15,000 social obligations anymore. We have shorter, if not zero, commute to work. We have learned to embrace things as being a little bit slower and a little bit more inconvenient for us as we are in the checkout line at the grocery store and we have to wait for them to wipe down the glass and wipe down everything. And it's just a time where things are naturally slower. Yet I find myself wondering, am I already over it? Have I already begun looking for how to expedite these processes? How to jump back into the hustle and bustle of life as it was before, simply because I don't like this pace, because to be busy means that I feel important. It means that I feel valuable not just to my family or to my friends, but to our society in general, that I derive my worth and my meaning from feeling busy. Or maybe you don't have a prototypical life of hurry as it's usually thought of. But that does not mean that you are not busy or you are not hurried. Maybe your life is the hurry of keeping other humans alive because parenting is a 24/7 job and you can't afford not to feel like you're hurried. Maybe it's a never-ending cycle of shows on whatever streaming platform it is, and so as soon as you finish Tiger King, you begin to watch Unsolved Mysteries, and then you jump over to Hulu for something, and you just feel like you can't afford not to keep up with what it is that everyone's watching. Maybe it's the constant phone notifications and the obsessive posting on social media because you feel like if you do not post every single thing or say every single thing about something the loudest, then you are not speaking up or you are not important or you are not valuable. We are a culture whose first response to people when they ask us how we are doing is to say busy, because we know that if we say busy that we are doing what we're supposed to do. And not only that, but for me personally at least, if I say busy, it means that people can't be too hard on me. That it means that I'm doing a lot, I'm juggling a lot, and so if what you get from me isn't what you expect, then just know that I've at least prefaced it with the fact that I'm busy. I've begun to set myself up for failure from the very beginning. Our goal, though, is not to be apprentices or understudies or imitators of life for the religion of America, the American religion of busyness and always accruing more. Our goal is to be understudies and apprentices of Jesus of Nazareth, the same Jesus who had a radically different vision of life than what we're currently living. He did not live a life of frenzied hurry. He lived a life that was slowly and deliberately following the guidance of his Father, a pace that is often rightly called walking with God. Not sprinting, not jogging, showing us how to walk with God like Adam and Eve used to do in the garden. Can you just imagine a world where you wake up on Sunday morning and you don't feel too tired or too beat down to tune in for a teaching video? You're not too busy or overwhelmed to love the people in your own community group like you want to and feel like you should. You're not too hurried to live the realities of the kingdom of God into our city in all realms, in both personal holiness as well as radical justice. And the question is, will we make the time to experience the life of Jesus that begins with being still and knowing that he is God and that he will be exalted among the nations? In his book entitled The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, pastor, author John Mark Comer, he lists a number of things that can help us detox from the drug of hurry, because if you look at it, it really is kind of like a drug where we become addicted to it and feel like we have to have it. And I'm going to give you some of the things that he writes in his book that are helpful, and I really want to be cognizant of this because I don't just want to teach on stillness and slowing and then give you a list of things to do. That is counterproductive. That is not at all my heart or my goal in this. Rather, this is a list of things or a list of ideas or considerations of how we can live our life differently. How we can live our lives as a subversive act of resistance against everything in our culture that is trying to distract us all the way to our graves. That is trying to keep us busied and hurried and distracted so that we miss the reality and the beauty of God. So here are some categories that we have found to be most effective. Number one, rethink how you drive. One of the most hurried places for me is driving. You can ask Mabry. Sometimes I am terrifying to ride with because I just hate wasting time on the road. I want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. I don't want to waste any time because time on the road is time I'm not with people. You get how the thinking goes. But what John Mark Comer recommends is actually driving the speed limit. He recommends actually coming to a stop fully at a stop sign or a red light. He recommends not switching lanes when you're approaching a red light because you see that the right lane has less cars than the left lane. He recommends not texting while driving. I just invite you to ask yourself, how would you drive if you were not consumed by hurry? If we are always becoming someone, then maybe ask yourself, how is the way you're driving potentially impacting and forming who you are today? If you drive with hurry, would that have an effect on your soul? The second thing is to rethink how you interact with your phone. He advises us to parent our phone, to put it to bed and to take it out of bed every night and every morning so that we are in control and we dictate how it interacts with us, not the other way around. He advises us to dumb down our phone so that it is not doing everything that it is capable of, because just because a phone can do something doesn't mean it should. He advises us to show up somewhere early and don't waste time on our phone. Just be present. Don't find yourself in this place where you have to always be doing something or wasting time or spending time. The third thing he advises is to set a time specifically for email and to create boundaries for work. Talk to Madison Floyd. She is a boundaries person. She loves them. I'm not as good with them, honestly. I'm learning. Do not let your work dictate your life. Set boundaries. Number 4, decide how you will interact with your media. This is the one that is probably the biggest struggle for me because I love watching shows. I love partaking of culture. But don't let media decide for you. Decide how you're going to interact with your media, whether that is TV, whether that is social media. Maybe it's setting a time limit on how much social media you can use per day. Maybe it's getting off of it altogether. Our community, we're doing a fast from social media just because for many of us, we feel like it has impacted our souls so negatively and we haven't been able to see people as children of God or in their image. And so we're just saying no to that for this season. And it's been amazing. It has been amazing to see how much time I have where I'm not just instinctively pulling my phone out of my pocket when I have 15 seconds and just scrolling. And then the fifth thing is to practice Sabbath and other spiritual disciplines that are not rushed. So meditation and mindfulness, journaling, prayer walks, etc. Practice things that are intentionally meant to slow down the RPMs of our soul. And these may seem like the most mundane and unspiritual things that anyone has ever presented in a sermon as a solution. But perhaps it is in the random and mundane and unspiritual parts of our life that God is seeking to do the greatest work in us. Maybe it is in these things that if we can finally turn these over to God, that if we can allow God to finally be Lord of these things, then we can finally be made into the people that have been called together for this exact moment. When I am forced to embrace stillness and slowing, I am reminded of all the ways in which I have been acting counter to the identity that God has called me into. I'm assaulted with the anxiety of all I have to do, all the bills I have to pay, all the debt that is awaiting me, the fact that the government isn't giving us a stimulus check like we thought it was, the fact that my first response to these things is anxiousness and anxiety and freaking out. When I'm left to practice stillness and slowing, this is my default kind of station. The fear of the unknown of the future. You see, I cannot rest until I have figured out my own way forward. I cannot rest until I have solved how to save myself and my family. I cannot rest until I. And the reason that I am so bad at practicing slowness and stilling is because I haven't been properly equipped and trained for how to deal with it. You see, there are a number of things that no matter how hurried I am, no matter how much planning and strategizing and networking and whatever it may be that I do, all I can do is wait and pray. When I choose to forego slowness and stilling for the sake of a hurried and frenzied planning and self-reliance, all I am doing is creating an environment where I can keep believing the lie that I am self-sufficient and I am not vulnerable. We are all vulnerable. And we can either embrace stillness and slowing and learn how to work through the difficult and scary thoughts that we all have that we're pushing deep down. I would advise you, like I do, to do it with a counselor, to do it with someone who's a really trusted friend who is skilled as a follower of Jesus and listening and walking with you. But we can either learn to embrace those things and give those things over to God and have them transformed, or we can distract ourselves all the way to the end of life where we pretend that we never have to deal with them, and we can continue to believe the lie that they don't have any real effect on how we view God and how we view other people and how we view ourselves, when that could not be further from the truth. Listen to this story from 2 Chronicles 20. It's the story of King Jehoshaphat and Judah. They were surrounded by 3 armies, and they saw no way out. Listen to this in 2 Chronicles 20. Lord, the God of our ancestors, are you not the God who is in heaven? You rule over all the kingdoms of the nations. Power and might are in your hand, and no one can withstand you. Our God, will you not judge them? For we have no power to face this vast army that is attacking us. We do not know what to do, but God, our eyes are on you. That is how I feel about 2020, if I'm honest. God, I cannot lead myself out of evil and away from temptation. Nonetheless, deliver myself into goodness. I have no power to face anything that is in front of me that feels like it's attacking me. And if I can just stay really busy and really hurried, then I can feel competent and safe and protected. But you tell me, God, to stop striving, to stop and to have my eyes on you and wait. And if I'm honest, I don't want to wait in the tension of the uncertainty. I do not want to be still, for it hurts too bad. It's too hard to face what bubbles up in me, God. I don't know if I can trust you because people in my past haven't been that trustworthy to care for my soul. And yet still you say, be still and know that I am God. That your glory will be exalted in the nations. That you have promised to be with us to the end of the age, even in the uncertainty, even in the painful waiting, even in the times where I can live in my own mind as if you don't exist. You see, if we are to move forward faithfully as the people of God, then it must begin with and regularly follow a pattern of simply embracing stillness before a holy God, so that we can always remember his great love for us and his great love for the world, even in the uncertainty. Jesus has showed us, and we have talked about this time and time again in the Garden of Gethsemane, that sometimes what we want to happen doesn't come to fruition. And yet God is still a safe place to be still and to weep with, and to take comfort in knowing that he delights in our presence. That he will be with us even in the uncertainty of the darkness. And as the psalmist said, even darkness is not light to you, my God. And so the question is, will we embrace the still and slow life of Jesus as a rhythm in our life? Will we adopt this pace of Jesus? A Japanese theologian has called God the 3-mile-an-hour God, because that's the pace of walking. And that is what God does, is he walks with us at a pace we can keep up with, a pace we can maintain, and a pace where we don't have to try and impress anyone with how fast we seem like we're going. If this sounds like good news to you, then perhaps you are right on the cusp of what God is trying to invite you into. And so we're just going to take communion together this morning, and we are going to practice stillness and slowing. So we're going to put some time on, and I just want to invite you, be still and know that he is God. Reflect on the fact that he will be exalted amongst the nations, that he will be exalted in all the earth, that he is with you to the end of the age, and that it is because of God's great love for you that Jesus came and showed us a different way to be human, a slower way to be human, a gentler way to be human, a way to be human that is full of grace. So with that, I just want to invite you to take communion, be still, and know that he is God.